Hello, Sean. Ready to take my notes.
Okay, wonderful.
All right, it looks like it's 3:30 on the dot, and so we'll go ahead and get started. Thank you all for joining us in our first virtual town hall meeting regarding the reopening of our school campuses. We're super excited to spend some time with you this afternoon. My name is Amy Slavinsky. I'm the superintendent, and I'll ask each of the cabinet members who are here to introduce themselves as well.
I'm Sean Snyder. I'm the Assistant Superintendent for Educational Services.
And I'm Jared Critchfield. I'm the Assistant Superintendent for Business Services.
Dave Beccari, Assistant Superintendent, HR.
Catherine Brown, Special Education Director and SELPA Director.
All right, thank you so much. Sean, I'm not sure, or Demi, who is our host for this meeting, if we have the ability to post the agenda for everyone to see. But if not, I'm just going to read through the agenda. Number 1 is welcome and purpose of the meeting. Number 2 is Board of Trustees decision. Number 3, timeline for transition to in-person learning. Number 4, overview of the hybrid model. Number 5, overview of the distance learning model. Number 6, process for selecting the best option for your student. Number 7, next steps. Number 8, question and answer session. And number 9, reflection and closing. And in this 90-minute session, we've allowed about 40 to 45 minutes of the time for question and answer. We want to make sure that we honor your time and that you have an opportunity to ask all the questions that you might have. So going back to the top of the agenda, I would once again like to warmly welcome you all and thank you so much for taking time this afternoon to be a part of this important process. The purpose of our meeting is to share information with you, as much information as we can, and then give you a chance to ask questions and get answers. So the Board of Trustees decision, number 2, our Board of Trustees took action last Wednesday afternoon in a regularly scheduled meeting to gradually begin to return our students to our school campuses, beginning on Monday, October 19th, with small learning cohorts of students. Our students who might be considered most vulnerable or most in need of extra support, such as our students who are performing far below grade level, students with significant learning disabilities, English learners, students who have been chronically absent or not engaged during distance learning, those types of student groups. So that is the first step. And then also on September 23rd, our board took action to have all students whose families decide this for them on Monday, November 16th, to return to school campuses in a hybrid model. And we'll talk more about what that means, a hybrid model. So that was the Board of Trustees decision, October 19th, for small learning cohorts of our most vulnerable student groups, and November 16th for all other students to return to our school campuses in a hybrid model with the option to stay in distance learning if the family chooses that. So number 3, our timeline for transition to in-person learning. That's pretty much what I just shared with you. We have a very detailed internal document as a timeline that is guiding all of the planning work that has been going on since March, and all the planning work that will happen between now and October 19th, and then between now and November 16th, to make sure that we are fully prepared, that each of our 12 campuses is fully prepared for a safe and healthy return, not only for our students, but for our staff and our teachers too. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Mr. Snyder, Sean, who's going to give us an overview of the hybrid model.
Sure, thank you for that and that great introduction. So what we're going to try to do here is to go over kind of a general overview of the hybrid models and talk a little bit. We want to get through our presentation pretty quickly so we can get to the question and answer. So I'm not going to go into great detail But Demi, maybe if you want to pull up the two options for families document might be helpful here. So just a general overview of the hybrid model at the elementary level will be the current plan, and again, and the plan that we plan to move forward with would be 4 half days a week. Students either attend for a period of time in the morning or a period of time in the afternoon. And again, the reason why we have to do it this way is because we are required to have all students 6 feet apart to the greatest extent possible. So we know our classrooms aren't big enough to have all students return at the same time and keep them 6 feet apart. So we have to divide each class into 2 separate cohorts. They're called cohorts. And so we'll have a morning cohort and an afternoon cohort, and elementary students will come Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, either in the AM or PM cohort, with Wednesday being a day of still, they call it asynchronous work, or really kind of distance learning as you know it. They'll complete assignments given in class on Wednesdays independently at home. And so that's really just a general overview of that elementary model. The secondary hybrid model will be 2 full days a week. And each of those 2 days, students will have their A day on one of the days and their B day on the other. So it might be Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday. Could be Monday, Thursday, Tuesday, Friday. We will definitely try to keep our elementary and secondary students on the same schedule, so that if you have children at elementary and at a secondary school, we'll try to work with families to keep them in school in the same days. So 2 full days, A day, B day, a little bit longer periods than what they're getting now with distance learning. And so we also have some rough draft sample hybrid schedules as well. I don't know here on this 2 options for families if there's anything that I really specifically want to point out. It's probably good to mention here. I'll start with the elementary level. So what we're doing here is basically adding in an entirely new instructional model. And so we have the same number of teachers, but we're going to have to try to add in another entire model. And so there's a likelihood that students may need to be assigned a new teacher, whether they're continuing in hybrid model or whether they're going to be participating in distance learning. And that's a challenge. We understand that. And, we've kind of been pretty honest and open about identifying some of these challenges and unfortunate things, but also recognizing that they're the reality of opening schools in a pandemic and trying to offer 2 different models, and really just trying to do the best we can to get kids back on campus, to get them socially seeing each other, interacting with each other. So there's definitely, challenges, but there's also a lot of great benefits to this. So that's one of the things that's probably important to point out. The cohort size, we talked about that. We are required to wear masks too. I know that's a question some people had. Is it 6 feet or a mask? No, it's 6 feet and a mask. So grades 3 and up are required by California Department of Public Health to wear masks, and grades 2 and under are strongly encouraged and likely could be required as well, just so that we have as safe an environment as possible on our campuses. Transportation, we're really working to try to do that. It won't be the same probably as the routes that we've been offering, but I know Mr. Critchfield is working hard with our Director of Transportation to help families out to get students to school under those new models. And also ELP is probably an important thing to call out. People might be wondering, how can I get my child there for only the morning if I work till 3 o'clock? Well, we hope to, be able to accommodate that through our extended learning program and childcare through the ELP program. So those are some of the more common things that have come up that are also addressed in that FAQ document that was emailed to you last week. So the sample schedules, I don't know how much we need to go into that. We're looking around 2.5 hours for morning instruction for elementary, and then 2.5 hours in the afternoon. This is all just, not absolute final yet, but it might look something like 8 to 10:30 for the morning cohort, and 11:30 to 2-ish for the afternoon. Again, rough ideas here, but just to give families an idea as you're thinking about this. So that would be elementary. And then the secondary, I think Demi can pull that one up. There's just the draft elementary. The secondary, okay, 8:30, the periods would be about 73 minutes long. So 73-minute period compared to, right now, students are getting 2 45-minute periods a week in distance learning. Some people have said, well, one 73-minute period isn't as much as that 2 45-minute periods. Well, that is true. We believe that having students in person in a classroom will help to be able to accomplish more. We don't have the computer freezing up or, people forgetting to unmute themselves. So, we think that the in-person will help account for some of that lost time, just the one contact instead of 2 per week. So 8:30 until, can you scroll down a little there, Demi? The end of the secondary school day is 3:12 would be dismissal. This is high school here, I believe. I can't remember if this is junior high as well, but certainly high school. Anybody remember? Is junior high a little different than this? It'll be similar with maybe just a little earlier dismissal time from what I remember. So it just gives an idea for families of what you might be looking at if you're thinking about the hybrid model. Another important thing to call out is that all students will be assigned to the hybrid model. So that'll be the default, but we also will give families the option for distance learning because we know there are families who just are not ready to send their children back yet. I'm going to talk about what the distance learning model will look like next. There was a great question I just saw come in the chat box about how will you decide who's in the AM cohort and who's in the PM cohort. I think, again, the spirit is to work with families as much as we can, trying to keep students from the same family in the same cohort and things like that. But please understand that it would be, really challenging. I guess it's probably important to say we won't be able to accommodate everyone's first preference. I think it's, we'll try, but I don't think it would be possible to give everybody exactly what you're asking for. So that work will happen at the school site level. And that's kind of down on number 6 for the agenda. It says process for selecting the best option for your student, next step. So I'll talk a little bit more about how that will happen at the school site level. So I think that's a pretty good general overview of the hybrid model and what that will look like. Some days here, some days at home, or mornings and afternoons. So now let's talk about distance learning for a little bit for families who might want to select that. We talked about students possibly needing to change teachers, and we know at the elementary level for certain that it will have to, students will need to change a teacher because the teachers continuing with hybrid will be coming to school in person and will be teaching the students that are there in an AM and PM and will not be available to facilitate distance learning like we've known it. So what will happen is you will receive an enrollment form for distance learning, and we'll get all of our families to sign up who want that option. And then we'll know those numbers and we'll basically create an entire new setup or school for those distance learning students. And, again, the exact details are not finalized yet, but it could be that there's a first grade teacher that does, or, we maybe have a few first grade teachers that do distance learning for all first graders in the district. It might not be school specific, just as you can imagine, if we had 6 first graders from Pioneer who want distance learning, well, we can't staff one teacher for just those 6 students. And so we have to be smart with our numbers and our staffing. And so that distance learning model will be determined based on the number of families that want it and the number of, in each grade level and the number of teachers we have to work with. So you can see there's work to be done there once we find out how many families want each option. After that, that will be really the biggest difference is that initial configuration, because once we have the kids placed with their new teacher, so to speak, for the rest of the year, then distance learning will continue very much like it for the beginning of this school year. And we will, work with teachers to pick up as close to where the students left off as possible, just understanding that, there could be a slight variation in where, for example, a student from Ione is compared to a student from Pine Grove, but we'll really try to make it as seamless as possible for the distance learning students. Secondary is where it gets a little more complicated, particularly with high school. And when you're dealing with college prep courses that are earning credits toward graduation or a particular college that a student may have really had their sights set on. So we are in the process of vetting our Edgenuity program and getting the CP courses A through G approved and looking at AP options and how can we make this seamless, and is there a way to keep students with their current AP teachers and all of those things. And I don't have the answer for you right now in this moment, but I can tell you we are actively researching ways to make sure, again, that that is as seamless as possible. And, you know, the whole mindset is really to keep all students whole, keep things, you know, keep the classes the same to the greatest extent that we can. But again, secondary teachers, it will be very challenging to do distance learning and a hybrid model at the same time. And so there may be a new teacher assigned for the distance learning students at the secondary level who uses Edgenuity as their platform for a lot of the courses. So, and I know one of the main questions was about electives, or is this class going to be available, you know, if I choose distance learning? And we are working just relentlessly to look for matches for electives in Edgenuity that might be close to a course that we offer, but not exact. Again, we just really want to make sure our students have as many options as possible at the secondary level to keep as close to the schedule that they have now.
Sean,
Yes.
can you take just a minute to explain to the group what is Edgenuity? There might be some folks here in our meeting who are not familiar with that term.
That's a great point. Yes, we speak this language in multiple times every single day. So Edgenuity is an online platform that offers a wide variety of courses and classes virtually for students. That's perfect, really, for distance learning. We've used it extensively for some of our credit recovery options. We use it for summer school, and we also have the ability to use it for college prep courses, and they even have AP courses within it. And so it is a nice platform to have at our disposal. It is very strong in the core content areas. Where it gets a little more challenging is with electives. And you can imagine a lot of our electives are hands-on type things that really is difficult to do virtually and remotely, although we've found ways to do a really nice job here to start the year with distance learning. Many of our teachers have. So good question, and hopefully that helps. So is there anything else, Amy, Jared, that you can think of as far as overviews, really general overviews for our families for distance learning and hybrid model? Is that a pretty good synopsis?
Maybe take just another minute or two and talk about the daily live interaction requirements ongoing in distance learning, if that's the choice that families make.
Okay, sure. Yeah, that's a good, another good clarification. So for distance learning, we know one of the big improvements for this time around was students are required to have daily live interaction with their teacher and with their peers. And so that's what we've become used to. Now, the important distinction there is that that's for distance learning, for 100% distance learning. So the students who continue with that option, who opt into distance learning when the sign up comes out, will continue to have that daily live interaction. Students whose families decide to go with the default of hybrid model will come in person 2 days a week, but they won't have the daily live interaction with their teacher the days that they're not on campus. So they will be completing assignments independently at home that are given during the 2 days of in-person. And the Wednesday is still one, we have that Wednesday kind of compressed instructional day. And we would hope to continue to offer some sort of a class meeting or something yet on Wednesdays, just for a little bit of a check-in or office hour, something like that. So there's some type of a check-in on that third day of each week. So that takes us to number 6, which is the process. How do I've had a lot of emails in response. How do I choose this? Or please send me the enrollment form. So just once again, the default option for all families is hybrid model. So if you're thinking that's what you would like and you're really wanting your student to come back a couple days a week, again, maintaining 6 feet of distance, wearing a mask, taking all safety precautions, frequent disinfecting of classrooms and surfaces that are touched. The hybrid model is the default. You don't need to do anything more at this time as far as enrolling your student in that. For distance learning, there will be an enrollment form that comes home, and that will be the week of October. Oh goodness, I should have this the week of October 5th, correct? So that's already next week. So, you know, the goal of these town hall meetings this week is to help families understand what the options will look like. And then next week, if you're thinking distance learning will be the option for you, there will be an enrollment form. Now, I'm sure some of you are thinking, well, I can't possibly decide yet because I don't have all the details. And when the enrollment form comes home next week, we should have all of those details in place, including for secondary, the class list or course selection form for the Edgenuity classes that will be available for distance learning. So a lot of work. It's Tuesday, so we have until, you know, next Monday, October 5th, to get all of that in order and ready to send home. And believe me, we're working just tirelessly every day to make sure everything's in place for families when they have to make that decision. So those enrollment forms will come from each school individually because the schools need to know their numbers so that they can then look at their staffing and determine, okay, we have this many students in this grade who want distance learning. The rest are all hybrid. So now how do we look at our staffing numbers and configure our classes accordingly based on what families choose? So that will all come to you from each individual school site. And then kind of next steps from there will be to the week of the 19th is when we're going to kind of look at all of that and get our classes set up in preparation for November 16th when the hybrid model starts. And then communication will come home between the 19th and November 16th about, you know, not all students will receive a new teacher. There's a chance that students may be able to continue just in the hybrid model with their existing teacher, but any communication about teacher changes will come obviously as soon as we know it, so we can facilitate that process as well. So I think this is probably a good time then. This is even more time than we anticipated. We moved through it pretty quickly, but I think a question and answer session, unless there's anything I've left out or forgotten, certainly that is possible. There's a lot of information to try to remember, but hopefully this has been a good general overview, and I think we can open it up for question and answer at this time.
Hi there. I just have a quick question about a high school student. So it was unclear to me in the paperwork that was sent out, but their days would be either Monday and Tuesday or Thursday and Friday. Is that correct?
Yes, that's a good question. The proposal from the stakeholder committee in the summer was a Monday, Thursday, Tuesday, Friday, and they had some very good rationale for that. And then we thought, well, elementary had a plan that called for Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, and we were trying to align it with elementary. But now that elementary is going to be 4 half days a week, the high school days, you know, certainly there's no way for them to align exactly with elementary. So it could be a Monday, Thursday, Tuesday, Friday. And I think that's where the high school committee has landed at this point, although that is not 100% finalized yet.
Okay. I feel like that would be a great option just for consistency for the families to have it be one side of the week or the other. So thank you.
Yeah, that's great feedback from the parents' viewpoint. Easier if it's 2 days in a row as opposed to the Monday, Thursday. Thank you for that.
I'm sorry, may I ask a question real quick? This is Cecilia.
Yeah, please.
Hey, okay, I'm watching your video and I'm at work right now, but I wanted to know if this is, if I go back on the website later, if I'm able to watch it again?
Yes, great question. We are recording this and we'll make it available. I had people reach out who said they weren't able to tune into either session, but would we record it so they could view it? So absolutely, we will compress it down and post it to the homepage of the website.
Perfect. Okay, well, because I started watching it, but if I get busy here, I'm gonna have to I'm gonna have to shut it off.
Yes, great question.
Okay. Thank you.
So what if our decision is based on whether or not our kids get to keep our distance learning teachers?
That is a good question. I mean, your decision as far as hybrid depends on whether or not they can keep the teacher or whether you go to distance learning if they can keep it. So part of that is, you know, something that we do need to work with our labor leaders on through the negotiations process. And so, I understand how connected students get to their teachers, and certainly by this point in the year, those bonds have been formed even virtually through a computer, right? And our goal is to try to keep as many students with their teachers as possible, but we know it's also important to just be upfront and honest that it will not be possible in all cases. So as soon as we can communicate that, we certainly will try.
Okay, so will we know before the October 5th of having to decide whether we wanted to do distance learning?
That is I don't, honestly, I don't know the answer to that. So I'm just going to say I don't know, because I don't want to give an answer that I'm uncertain of. Our goal would be to, I know that's important for families to have that information to make the decision. So knowing that and hearing that from all of you, we will make every effort to try to figure that out. But part of that is with the staffing, and part of that will happen after we see how many families want distance learning. So it's tough.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
So Sean, I have a suggestion with regard to that, and it really is tough. I just want to emphasize that Sean's answer is spot on. In order to figure out the staffing and determine which teacher is doing what, we need to know what the family's choices are and how many students will be remaining in distance learning. All of that drives the decisions around any possible staffing changes. So the sequence there really makes a difference. But Sean, I know that we've also talked about what if a parent changes their mind? Can you talk about that?
Yeah, I think certainly in that case where you chose an option and you found out your student couldn't keep their teacher and you change, we will do everything we can to work with families. You know, we know how difficult this is, and opening schools in a pandemic with 2 instructional options is no easy task. It's not easy for any of us. So we want to work with families. You know, if there were a change that needed to happen, it'll be challenging to change, you know, midstream once we get up and rolling, but something like that I think we'd be able to accommodate.
Great, thank you.
I have from Demi, if you have a question, if you could raise your hand in the chat, that would be great and easier to see because we do have quite a few participants. It's hard for her to monitor every screen. So there's the little hand raise function down in the reactions there, or you click on your thing and it'll help her know who to call on and in what order.
I keep getting a thing saying for me, the host wants me to unmute. Does that mean it's my turn?
Yes, I think so. Go ahead.
Oh, okay. My daughter has an IEP. Is that considered one of the vulnerable students that gets to go back early?
Catherine, do you want to talk to that, or would you like me to address it?
So the students with IEPs, though we do acknowledge that all students with IEPs, 504s, et cetera, are considered at risk, that will be decided by each school site. So not all or even most of our mild mod students will be coming back prior to November 16th.
But I think to answer that, you can expect some communication either from the case manager or the school regarding you know, your student and whether or not they'll be in that very first group on October 19th as the most significant at-risk students, or whether they'll be in the November 16th group.
Yes, we are working to create those lists and should have something hopefully no later than Wednesday of next week, but we are still working on it.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Do I just jump in since I was unmuted? I mean, nobody's really calling names.
Sure, that's okay. Sure, go ahead. Yes, please.
Okay, hi, my name's Angela, and I had a couple questions, if you don't mind. I have a high school student at Argonaut, and I have 2 boys at Jackson Elementary. This might be a question for Dave, and super nice to see you, Dave, but I was wondering if it is possible to remain on distance learning, but not change your teacher if the teacher is willing to have a camera in the classroom to continue the Zoom so the boys get live instruction still?
Well, Angela, to answer your question, that is an item that we will be negotiating with our bargaining unit. So that has yet to be determined, but that is definitely something that has been in discussion.
Okay, thank you. Because I know both boys' teachers are willing to do that. Because just speaking with my boys personally, I don't want to speak for parents. I just want to make that clear. But it would not be in their best interest to switch teachers, just like, you know, Sean was alluding to earlier. And given that I've spoken to them and they were willing, if that was something that I could just personally request at the school, or that's a higher level union negotiation type thing.
Yeah, I think as Dave said, that will be something that we will negotiate with our labor leaders. So thank you.
Do you think that's possible to be determined prior to us having to complete the form? Because like you were saying earlier, I cannot say whether I want hybrid or distance learning because I'm in this pickle where I physically cannot implement the hybrid with the 3-hour instruction time. But at the same time, if I do distance learning and they switch teachers, that's at the detriment to the boys. So I'm really in a pickle. I won't be able to give you the numbers that you guys need.
Yeah, we're going to do everything possible. And even if we didn't, like, say the enrollment forms go home on Monday, and even if we couldn't have every last detail by Monday, we could have a follow-up message that goes out with some additional communication, you know, Tuesday, Wednesday, something like that.
Okay.
Or the Friday deadline. You know, we're going to do everything we can to get that information out to you guys.
Okay, thank you. And then my high school question was the course list. So you were saying for a high school student to remain on distance learning, the courses available on distance learning will be made available prior to us completing this form?
Yeah.
Okay, my specific question is, I know you probably can't answer this, but I think you could probably guesstimate. My student has 3 AP courses as well as Spanish 2 and Avid. But she does not want to go hybrid. She'd like to remain on distance learning. With having that type of caseload, is it more than likely those courses, like having that many, she wouldn't be able to stay?
No, we want to, again, you know, our goal is to be able to have students continue with all the courses they're taking to the greatest extent possible, especially those. I mean, goodness, we are going to do everything we can and explore every option possible to allow students to not have to make tough decisions about, especially classes like that. So,
Right.
Yeah. On that.
Sorry. Whoa, there's a lot of back feed. I'm sorry. Because I do think that camera question posed earlier would also be applicable in this scenario for those specific courses where you guys only have maybe one teacher at a site that can teach AP Hug or other courses similar, you know?
Yes, most definitely. A camera in an AP classroom would be a solution, and it would allow those students to continue with that teaching as well. So that's something that we will, you know, explore and hopefully, I mean, our goal is to have all of that information on the form that goes out next month.
Okay, so the course list that you were referencing and basically the answers to these questions, are you posting them on your website or these will be dispersed out to the families?
I think probably both. You know, there will be an enrollment form that'll come home from the school site level, but like that list of courses for distance learning for high school students, we would post that to the website so everyone could access it from one place. So I think the answer to that would be both.
Okay, thank you so much.
Yeah.
And Sean, just to jump in, I think a really good example of that is the communication that you sent out most recently. It had all of the attachments that have been used in this meeting, and all of those materials are posted to our public webpage. In fact, the main webpage. So if anyone just goes to amadorcoe.org, the very front main webpage, you can click on it and get to all of the documents that were sent out most recently. And so we will continue to do that with all additional information that's forthcoming.
Yeah, these are great questions, though. Thank you for asking, because your questions probably help 10 other people in the meeting. So thank you.
So Sean, I am sorry, I just came into the meeting. I have a third grader and I did not hear anything about the third grade going back to school.
Okay, so just quickly, third grade are on the November 16th schedule to come back in a hybrid model. And the plan for elementary is 4 half days a week, either in a morning cohort or in an afternoon cohort. The morning cohort will be somewhere from 8 to around 10:30, and the afternoon would be 11:30 to around 2. Again, times to be finalized, but that's just a general idea. So 4 days a week, either AM, PM cohort. And if the hybrid model, the students would come to school those 4 days, and there will be a way for families to continue distance learning if that's what they choose as well, through a form that'll go home next week.
Okay, great. So November, what was that again? November what?
November 16th is the day that the hybrid model will resume for in-person instruction.
Okay, thank you very much, Sean.
And yes, communication will come from the schools once we, as far as if you're in the AM cohort or the PM cohort, closer to that time. So you know when to send your student and all of that information. That'll be sorted out once we see what each family wants, what students are wanting, how our distance learning will be staffed and hybrid model will be staffed. And then, you'll get a message from your school site where to go and when.
Perfect. Thank you so much. You have a good evening.
Thanks, you too.
How'd that happen?
Oh, hello. So I have a few questions, but I guess my first one is more focused on the junior high and specifically 6th grade, since I've heard a little bit about AP courses and not wanting those kids at high school to lose that. I've heard a little bit about elementary, and correct me if I'm wrong, but for elementary, you're saying it would be 1 grade, for a child that chooses to continue distance learning versus hybrid. So would a child at the elementary level have one teacher teaching for, let's say, 2nd grade, but it may not be at their school site?
I think that's a possibility given our staffing. And I used the example earlier of, let's just say, Pioneer, for example, or Plymouth, had 6 2nd graders that wanted distance learning, and Pine Grove had 13. You could combine those 2 groups with a 2nd grade teacher to provide 2nd grade distance learning for a set of students. And so that's possible. But again, we won't really know the details of that until we see how many families want what and the breakdown by school site and all of.
Sorry, I guess my next follow-up question then would be, is it possible that my child who is in 2nd grade, who I do not plan on sending back, I want him to continue distance learning, is it possible that he will have a teacher that is teaching 2 or even 1 or 2 other grades than his grade?
I don't think that would be highly likely. The idea behind maybe having a teacher do 2nd grades from a couple different schools would be to eliminate that,
Okay.
Be more efficient with staffing. We could eliminate combination classes that way, instead of, a teacher at Pioneer having to do 1st, 2nd, and 3rd grade distance learning. You could have one teacher do students from a couple different schools.
Okay, and so my next question is, I have a 6th grader at the junior high who's gotten fairly attached to her 4 or 5 different teachers she has. Coming from elementary to all of a sudden 4 or 5 teachers has been a change, but one she's made pretty well. She's already an anxious child. Is she going to keep any of these people when she chooses distance learning to continue? And I know some of this is staffing, but what is the plan for junior high as far as teachers?
I guess there would be a possibility if there were, some of her teachers category that, were not able to come back. And again, part of that is we have to go through negotiations process to determine if one of her teachers were in one of those categories. There's a chance she could retain that teachers for distance learning as well. And that all has to be kind of determined, and sorted out yet.
Okay, so basically only if they have some sort of reason to not return. So what happens if all of her teachers can return and they all go teach hybrid? Who are her teachers for all of her classes?
For the junior high, it would be
Yeah.
similar to the high school model where the distance learning platform would be Edgenuity, and there would be someone assigned in each of the content areas to kind of oversee that group of students. It's very similar to what I described for the high school.
And they have live instruction?
Yes, they have to. So the distance learning only students are required to have the live daily interaction. Not necessarily live daily instruction, but live daily interaction. And then the Edgenuity platform provides kind of an interactive, instructional type platform, like a Khan Academy almost, I believe is what it's most similar to. So live daily interaction, yes. Live instruction in each of the separate content areas from that teacher from our district. I can't guarantee that.
Okay, so it might be live daily interaction with her peers and a teacher, but maybe not an Amador County teacher.
It would be live daily interaction with an Amador County teacher and
Okay.
her peers, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I guess that as I wrap up, I would just really stress, I do not plan on sending my children back during a pandemic to school. I don't think it's the right choice for me or my parents who will have to care for my children on their off times. And so I just ask that even as my students, that if they choose to continue distance learning, that you ensure that they are getting an equal education to those students who are choosing hybrid and in-person. It saddens me to lose children, my own students, as their teacher, and I'm very saddened for my own students who I will keep distance learning, and they will lose those connections that they've already made. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Nikki. We certainly agree and want to do everything we can to make sure that happens. Yeah.
Hi, I have a couple of questions. One, I'm curious as to why the AM/PM model is out there for elementary, but only elementary, because if you have kids in multiple grades, like at multiple schools, you now have a logistical nightmare to try and get your kids to school. If you've got somebody that, say they're, my last name's P, so we're gonna assume you're breaking them up by alphabet. So we're a Thursday, Friday junior high group, but my elementary kid now has to go PM Monday through Thursday, but she's SPED too. So SPED's model right now for elementary is a proposed like junior high and high school. So they're going to have an A group and a B group on Monday, Tuesday, and Thursday, Friday. So now my elementary student has to go Monday through Thursday in the afternoon, in theory, and then has to go Thursday and Friday in the morning because that's when her special ed classes are meeting. So now I've got 5 days a week that she's getting exposed, which honestly, between that and the 1 hour that you've got to clean and get kids in and off or on and off the campus and the teachers, and everybody's got to get lunch. I just think like the elementary model is a nightmare. Like it seems like there's way too much room for cross-contamination because you've got one teacher that is teaching both groups, right?
Correct, yes.
Okay, so the same teacher is teaching a group of kids in the morning, and then they're teaching a group of kids in the afternoon, which the whole point of having your, core groups is to have them so they're not interacting with each other, right?
Correct, yeah, yes.
But now you have a teacher or staff who is the carrier between the two groups because they're all meeting on the same day. So is the staff supposed to shower in that hour too to get themselves clean? Are they supposed to be wearing gowns the whole time? Because I know special ed is, but that's different than the regular ed.
Yeah, so I'll try to address each of the components of the question. So the alphabet, first letter of the last name will just be really a starting point. And obviously in your situation, we would really try, I know it's impossible in the 4 half days a week and 2 full days a week to have the exact same schedule for your students, but we would do everything possible to accommodate that. And the alphabet is really just a starting point, and we'll have to do a lot beyond that. The other part of it is, I'm in communication with Dr. Kerr these days almost daily and talking with her about these plans, and is she in approval of this, and does this model work? And so really I understand your concerns about the 2 cohorts on the same day, but the 6-foot distancing and the wearing masks and the disinfecting the classrooms in between the cohorts is really the mitigating factors that help, us being able to do that and her approve that plan. So that while I understand this, she's in approval of this, and we've talked a lot about the 4 half days versus 2 full days. And some of the stronger reasoning is especially for those younger students, that regular 4 days a week of contact for the 2.5, or so hours compared to just 2 days and then going 3 full days again at home. The younger kids, the more regular contact is really important. So that's some of the rationale behind why. So I don't know if that helps at all. I know it doesn't solve your problem, but it's kind of some of the thinking behind it.
Well, I just, I know I'm not the only one who has kids on multiple campuses. It just seemed weird to me that you would have elementary is the only one that has a completely different model than everybody else, especially considering those are not kids. And maybe part of it was because they're not kids that can necessarily stay home alone because they're too young. So it's a more, let's get them back to, everybody's perceived babysitters, which they're not, they're teachers. But then I worry about the teachers because that's a lot to put on them in one day to try and get all that clean. Because I know it was said that they won't be the one cleaning, but let's be realistic. It will most likely be the teachers and the staff who is sitting there trying to clean in between the kids and pick up and make sure nothing is touched by this group, but that's going to be touched by that group. And then they still have got to do their planning for their, Friday. They got a whole whopping 15 minutes to, do their prep time at the end of the day when kids are still going to be trying to leave. So it just seems like it's, I don't know. It just seems like it wasn't the best choice. And I say that obviously for me personally, it wasn't the best choice because now I've got to try and figure out how do you make that work when your kid is, you're trying to keep them there, but you're also not trying to have them there 5 days a week, but in theory they could be. And then how does it work when you have, a kid that is mainstreamed, but also has SPED? Do they have to pick one or the other? Like, does she have to only go to the special ed class or only go to the gen ed class and lose out on the other one?
Yeah, no, I really appreciate your feedback. And, I know we have a few elementary principals listening in here as well, and they're hearing the feedback too. So ironically, we spent about 45 minutes today, again, talking about the 4 half days versus the 2 full days. So I appreciate that. And I think Catherine wants to talk a little bit about the special education situation and mainstreaming versus core content.
So first of all, let me back up just a little bit. If your student is a moderate to severely handicapped student in the county program, that program and that comeback is quite different than what we are talking about here in this meeting. So schedules would be quite different. We have discussed and will be doing everything possible to allow our students, our special education students, to continue with the collaboration in other classes as practicable at this time. Part of that decision will be made after we see, again, as Shauna has explained, once we know what our families have chosen as far as whether it's DL or hybrid, and then through negotiations and our teacher availability. So yes, we will continue to do everything we can, but we cannot at this point guarantee that. As far as in-person types of collaboration, we may be able to work on that in other ways, but we're still working on that. But it is something we talked about today and that has been on my mind. And I know Dr. Russell's as we move forward with both our mild mod and our mod severe programs.
Yeah, because I know they were, they're like, okay, you can come back in October. And I already spoke to her teacher and asked, if she comes back, what is the plan? And it's a 2 days a week, but then it's like, okay, are you guys going to be able to do her gen ed stuff with her? And they're like, no. So she would go 2 days a week for however many hours, come home, and then we still have to do gen ed. And I said, honestly, it's not worth it. So she's not going to go back until gen ed goes back and then go from there. But trying to figure out, will they let her go between the 2 classes with her aide, or does she have to just pick one class and stick with it until everything's normal again?
Okay, so
So-
that's a good, that is a good question that I can clarify. So students, because if we were just operating under the guidance for the small at-risk cohorts, we are not supposed, students and adults are not supposed to mix cohorts. But because we are now eligible for opening in a hybrid model of in-person, that's after you've been in the red tier for 2 weeks, adults and students can go from cohort to cohort. So she would be able to do both once we resume that normal instruction. If that
Okay.
helps.
Thank you.
And,
Yeah.
and we have ordered thousands of gowns and masks and face shields and all the PPE, thermometer checks, disinfectant by the hundreds of gallons. And we have backpack sprayers for our custodians. They're going to look like exterminators, but they're actually going to be spraying disinfectant everywhere. And so that hour between the morning and afternoon will be dedicated to disinfecting. As we know, we're switching cohorts, and we'll have all the materials and supplies available for students and staff who need them to keep everybody as safe as we can.
Okay. Thank you.
Mhm.
Hello.
Yes, go ahead.
Hi. I have questions regarding, I was just curious, so is there going to be options for transportation and on-campus meals provided?
Great question. I'm going to let Mr. Critchfield take that one.
Yeah, I can speak to that. That's a common question. So we are still working through our bus routes. Obviously, one of the issues with busing is spacing students 6 feet apart. Buses were definitely not designed for students to sit 6 feet apart. And so right now we're looking at a capacity of around 20 to 28 students per bus. They're going to have to alternate between window and aisle seats and have to stagger everybody to be able to make that work properly with Dr. Kerr's blessing. And so to be able to accommodate that, transportation routes will look a little bit different, but we are working on getting those finalized so that before you make your decision, you will know whether or not transportation will be provided. In a very general sense, we are expanding the no transportation zones around each school. So the closer you live to a school, the less likely transportation will be provided. That excludes, of course, students with severe handicaps and things like that that receive special education transportation. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the general education students in that type of transportation. We will be expanding the no transportation zone basically for each school so that we can get more buses to the farther corners of the county. As we know, that's where transportation is needed the most. And then with meals, we are still under, we started the year not sure what was going to be allowed with meals, but they ended up instituting what happened in the springtime, and that's all students eat for free. All you have to do is appear younger than 18 years of age. You do not even have to identify yourself, and you can have a free meal. That's going on right now. We have 5 different areas for pickup. And when we return to in-person learning, meals will also be provided to all students who want a meal, a breakfast and a lunch. They will be grab and go because of the situation, but we will be providing meals up through the end of December. And then in January, it might look a little different because the current standard or the current rules take us through December, and that's changing every day. So what I'm speaking of will take us up until the winter break. And then as we get closer to coming back from winter break, we will provide more information on what meals will look like come 2021.
Oh, thank you.
You're welcome.
Hello.
Go ahead.
My question's about Argonaut High School and handling sports, namely soccer, football. Just what's being done there, and are they going to actually have games? And
So I can speak to that. So CIF, which is the organization that regulates high school sports, has put out a proposed calendar with, instead of 3 seasons of sport, they've split the sports up into 2 seasons of sport. And that is set to start in December. But Dr. Kerr has made it very clear that that is CIF's plan, and that is yet to be something that is a foreseeable reality at this point. We have approved conditioning, and some of our high school sports are doing conditioning, but all that has been approved are individual conditioning activities, which obviously doesn't really work well with athletics. It's going to be great for our golfers, but besides golf, it doesn't work very well. And so that is something that at this point, unfortunately, we don't know, because a lot of the circumstances revolving around athletics are beyond our control. As athletics are allowed, we will definitely be all in on providing athletics as a school district, and we want everyone to know that. But at this point in time, athletics are not approved in the typical sense. And so we hope that as conditions improve, that when that December date rolls around, we'll be able to have athletics. But at this point in time, that is undetermined.
Well, how about the strength and conditioning, PE, those classes?
Yeah, PE for in-person learning will be, in force, and we will have that option when our secondary students who choose hybrid, but there will be limitations. I mean, they won't be able to have the typical interactive sports that they have, and it will, the majority, PE classes will look more like strength and conditioning classes for everybody. You're not going to see your typical, basketball unit and things like that where they're able to do that at this point in time. And of course, I keep saying that because the conditions keep evolving, but Dr. Kerr made it very clear that, contact sports and sports where students are interacting face-to-face are not an option right now.
Okay, well, thank you.
You're welcome.
Hello.
Yes, go ahead.
Hi, thanks for having this meeting. So my student is an Amador High School student, and he currently takes one class at Argonaut that was not offered at Amador High School. Will he be able to continue taking that class at Argonaut?
And so are you speaking of in the hybrid model in person?
Yes, yes.
Yeah, I mean, that would be our plan, to continue to offer those same courses in person for our guest students. I don't know if Jared wants to say any more with your secondary knowledge.
Yeah, I mean, we're still going to have some obstacles like we would have in a normal situation of getting them back and forth between schools, but the plan would be to still offer that.
Okay, I didn't know if they're not allowed to mix, if that's considered a different cohort or...
Dr. Kerr has approved the mixing of cohorts at the secondary level, and that's just a reality that everyone needs to be aware of if they're choosing hybrid, because there really is no way to pull off secondary education without some cohort mixing. So yeah, it's a great question, because we do have a fair number of guest students that go back and forth between our high schools.
All right, there's a little logistical issue with the new schedule. There's not enough time to get over there, but we'll figure that out, I guess.
That's a good point. And we've talked about the length of the passing period. So again, that's our draft and, the best schedule we have now, but that, there could be a little wiggle room, a few minutes here or there. So that's a good point and good feedback for us to think about.
Yeah, well, that's just one little issue. Thank you.
Yeah, and so just to the mixing of cohorts, she has approved it, but it is going to be paramount for our students to wear their masks and to stay 6 feet apart to prevent any, if there did happen to be a positive case among a student, you can imagine how many contacts they could have with this model. But this is the way all secondary schools are doing it that I've seen. And so we really just need to stay 6 feet apart and wear our masks, and that should, those are the protective factors right there.
Hello.
Yes, go ahead.
Hi, Sean. Hey, I had a question to expand a little bit further on the idea of having the cameras for courses, specifically at the high school level. And what I'm wondering is if you have explored, or maybe you could explore, the idea of if in the hybrid model, let's say for an example, my daughter attends on Monday and Tuesday, have you explored the potential of having the Zoom calls continue for the days when they would not physically be at the school, so that there would be live instruction while the other half of the kids were sitting in that classroom? I just think that that might be a little bit more helpful, rather than if they're there the Monday, Tuesday, and then kind of on their own for the whole rest of the week, that if there was a way to implement the teacher being able to turn on that Zoom call and the kids being able to log onto that live, that it might keep them a little bit more engaged. And I'm just wondering if that's something that you guys have considered.
Yeah, actually, as a matter of fact, we were just talking about that today. And so in that case, instead of teachers teaching an A day on Monday and then another A day on, let's say it was Monday, Tuesday, or Monday, Thursday, Tuesday, Friday, instead of repeating the same lessons for both A days and B days, they teach new content all 4 days, and students either get it in person or they tune in virtually. We were talking about that and talking about pros and cons, and didn't make a decision, but the answer to your question is yes. We've talked about it.
Okay. Yeah, I think that for those kids who choose the hybrid model, if you did go with that Monday, Tuesday, and then, or the Thursday, Friday, that, having them just be at home on their own for those other 3 days might disengage them a bit. And so if there's a way to figure that out with that AB schedule, I think it would be really beneficial to have those live Zoom calls for the days when they're not physically at the school.
Okay. Thank you. Appreciate that.
Thank you.
Hello.
Hi, yes, go ahead.
Hello.
Yes, go ahead.
I don't know why it's doing that.
That's better.
Hello?
That's better. Yeah, there.
Much better. Thank you. Much better. Thank you. No.
Maybe you could type your question in the chat. I don't know if that's a possibility for you. I don't know what device you're on.
Yeah, that's a good idea. These types of issues have become the norm for us these days, right? So it's not uncommon for that to happen, or for someone just to forget to unmute themselves.
All right, I guess I'm up. I have 2 questions. I have 2 girls at the elementary level at Pioneer. One is in 3rd grade and one is in 5th. I guess my first question would be, how are you guys going about dividing the AM and PM groups? And is there a way that you're working it out to where 2 students on the same campus would be going the same days?
We definitely want to have students from the same family going the same, either the morning cohort or the afternoon cohort. And as far as how they're going to divide those up at the elementary level, it's really going to be, once we see which families want distance learning and once we see who wants the hybrid model, it'll be by classroom pretty much. So let's say, in the 4th grade class at Pioneer, there's 16 kids left that want the hybrid model in person, then we'll do 8 and 8, and we'll work with families to, the best we can, work with families for the option that works best for them.
Okay, and then my second question is, I know you guys said transportation is, the closer you live to the school, the less chance you're going to get transportation. I live up in Mace Meadows, probably 5 minutes or so away from the school. However, my kids cannot walk along Highway 88 to get to the school, as we're in such a rural area. Is that going to be taken into consideration as far as busing goes?
Yes, Alyssa, I should have been more clear. I'm glad you brought that up. We are not expecting any of our kiddos to hitchhike down Highway 88. So yeah, absolutely not. Distance, that reference would probably make more sense when we're talking about Jackson, Sutter Creek, Ione.
Right, okay.
We need to get more buses to the more difficult areas. And I mentioned in the board meeting, and this isn't totally comprehensive, but the idea would be more buses that go out to Comanche and to Fiddletown and River Pines and up country and some of the areas off of Highway 16 where we know that it can't. But, you know, you live in Castle Oaks and Ione, and you used to have a bus, probably not. I mean, that
Okay.
would be the example, because you're absolutely right. Mace Meadows is not that far, but I would not want my own child nor yours walking down Highway 88 to Pioneer.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, really good questions.
The buses may have to make a couple runs in those areas, right? It may just be, you know, hey, the bus is full and we got to make a quick run to Pioneer, and then they come back and get more kids. I mean, it may look like that at times.
Hello.
Hi. Go
I
ahead.
have, hey, okay, so I have a kindergartner, and my question was looking at the two cohorts, like AM and PM. Like, my girl wakes up 6:45, 7:30 every day. There's no changing that. And to have her start school at like 12 o'clock, I feel is unrealistic, because she is like done at that point in her day. So how are we handling, because my last name starts with a U, so how are we handling being able, like, is there going to be flexibility in maybe being able to bump her, or?
Yeah, good question. So the alphabet really, again, is just a starting point for dividing cohorts. Really at the elementary level, those kindergarten classes, we'll just try to take half the kids, you know, and put them in the morning, half the kids that are left from that classroom that want the hybrid model, and put them in the AM cohort, and half that get in the PM. So our goal is to work with families to try to give them whatever option works best. So hopefully we'll be able to accommodate your, you know, morning cohort request.
Okay, and will we know that prior to being able to do our option? Because I know the decision requests are going out October 5th, and so if we want to stick with distance learning, we have to fill that out. But will we have an idea of what group we're going to be in at that time?
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't think we'll be able to let you know, because the way we are going to be able to know how to divide them is based on how many families choose distance learning. But what I would say is that if you selected hybrid and you got stuck with the afternoon model and you said, this isn't going to work, I need to go distance learning, we could accommodate you with a change at that point. Hopefully we wouldn't have to do that, but just so you're aware of that.
Okay, and that kind of leads into my other question is, if we decide to do hybrid and we want to try it out for my daughter, and then she decides that she's not comfortable with it and it's not working, are we allowed to go back to distance learning? I know that you said that there wouldn't be the ability to change once you decided, but I can understand distance learning going back to campus, but is there more flexibility going from campus back to distance?
So the answer is we're going to do whatever we can to work with families and accommodate them. We would like to have families commit to an option for the rest of the year, unless we could bring all kids back, you know, with 100% with no restrictions, which, you know, we're not sure that that'll happen or not. But I think it may be easier to go from hybrid to distance learning or vice versa. It's just really going to depend on the numbers, you know, and we won't know any of that till we get those selections from families. And if there was a first grade distance learning class where the teacher still had space, we could accommodate that, but, you know, there's a chance we couldn't accommodate every family. So our goal is to work with everyone. We know this is new for all of us in very difficult circumstances, and we want to just try to do what's best for every student. So.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate your information.
Mm-hmm.
Hi, I have two questions. It's Maya here. I want to piggyback on the importance to some families of teachers, and I just wanted to suggest maybe that could be an option that goes out like on the questionnaire if the choice hinges on anything, just so then you guys would at least know how many people might come back and be like, oh, my child's not gonna be able to keep their teacher, we can't do this.
Yeah, that's a good suggestion to give us at least some data. I choose distance learning. However, if I can't keep my child's teacher, I may choose hybrid or, you know, something like that. I think that's
right.
Yeah, great feedback, and it would give us a little more information to look at.
And then the other thing I was curious, is, because I have two kids. One is Mod Severe and one is mainstream. I was curious if in November there's been talk about Mod Severe doing the 4 days a week for consistency, because since that was brought up for the elementary schools, I think the special ed in elementary, that's just as important for consistency. So I was wondering if that's been brought up yet.
Mod Severe will actually start October 19th, 4 days a week, 4 mornings a week.
Because I heard it was 2 days, 2 days.
Well, yeah, it's 2 and 2, but as far as you're saying, so in November, looking at them going, each cohort going 4 days a week.
Yes. So like I would have, say, if my child went back in October, I would have one child going back, or if both my kids go back. I'd one go back in October, one go back in November. And then, so in November, I would have one child 2 days a week and one child 4 days a week, even though, I mean, realistically looking at it, my 2 days a week child needs more consistency than my 4 day.
Right. Well, that's a great point. And I do think with Mod Severe and the in-person, we really don't know what we don't know yet. And so once they come back October 19th, we're always open to reevaluating and assessing that. And so in November, we would, I mean, I don't want to say one way or the other, but we would definitely look at those types of options. That's really important feedback. So thank you.
Okay, awesome. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Good questions.
Yeah, hi. It sounds like you guys have all the tools in place to protect everyone, which is great. Thank you. I know regardless if I choose to send my child back, there's a chance they can be exposed. Hold on, buddy. They can be exposed to COVID. And I just wanted to ask what, basically what the process is if someone in the class or if one of the teachers got tested positive, would our kids still remain in school, or would they, be expected to get tested and take a leave of absence until they got a negative test back?
Yeah, great question.
Thank you very much, Nicole, for asking that question, because that was last week kind of the question of the week. And so there are different protocols that are outlined in our health and safety plan during COVID-19 for a safe return to school. And I'll just give you the summary of what those are.
Okay.
So if there's a student who has been a contact of someone with, there's different levels of what happens. If a student comes to school that has been a contact, the student needs to go home and quarantine for 14 days, that the classroom stays open because they haven't been a positive test that came into the classroom. If a student or staff member tests positive, let's start with a student. So let's say a student in your child's class tests positive. In that case, the entire classroom, including the teacher, goes home for the 14-day quarantine period. As long as it's not the teacher who tested positive, then the class resumes in a distance learning format for that 14-day quarantine, while things, and we work with public health with all the protocols for that, and communication and contact tracing and all of those things. So in that case, the cohort does close down for 14 days. And then once public health clears us, we come back.
Okay.
If it's the teacher who tests positive, the same thing happens. The whole class goes home, and we would have a substitute teacher that would come in and provide the distance learning for that 14 days. So all the students are home, substitute takes over, and we have identified a good number of substitutes at this point who are in the process of getting trained to facilitate, virtually with Google Classroom and all the tools our current teachers are using. So again, the goal is to make it as seamless as possible, because we've seen it happen other places who've resumed schools, and we just want we want the learning to continue no matter what the model.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you. That's the answer I was looking for.
Okay, thank you.
Hi, Sean. I had a couple of questions for you. I guess to follow up on the one that was just asked, it sounds like that's kind of what would happen at the elementary level. At the secondary level, where we have a student in a single classroom now switching around and exposing a whole A through L or M through Z group, how does that go home period look like for secondary?
Yeah, that is so, Brooke, that's a great question. Initially, that's where Dr. Kerr was very concerned about cohorts mixing and the possibility that, you know, by the time they find out they're positive, they probably come into contact with most of the kids at the school in their cohort, right? Just with passing periods and things like that. So the chances of an entire school needing to close down were pretty likely at the secondary level. Now, this is an example of where Department of Public Health's guidance and CDC's guidance is changing all the time. They haven't released this officially yet, but in my conversation yesterday with Dr. Kerr, she was talking about places who, instead of closing down the whole school, they actually go to work with the contact tracing to see who the student may have been within 6 feet. I mean, the definition of a close contact is within 6 feet for 15 minutes or more. So if you walk past that student during passing time, that's not a close contact, and the chances of you contracting it from that are very low. So she has said other places now are considering not sending the whole cohort home or the whole school, but really getting into that in-depth contact tracing instead to try to minimize the disruption. So I know maybe that's a little gray or vague, but that's kind of the current thought process behind it.
Okay, and then the second question I had, I know initially at the board meeting, they were throwing around some different dates for the secondary level, and we settled on November 16th, but with a backup date of January 4th. When will we know definitively for secondary what our go back date is with all the things you guys have to kind of work out with that?
I'll let Amy take this question.
Yeah, thank you, Sean. I appreciate that. At this moment in time, the definitive date is November 16th. We are doing everything that we can to put a plan in place to make that happen. We know that that was the board's unanimous decision, and we know that we have many challenges in front of us, but we're working very hard to find solutions to every single one of those challenges. I think the only thing that would change that would be the COVID conditions in our county. If all of a sudden the conditions changed and Dr. Kerr told us we needed to adjust our plan, then we would do that. But at this moment in time, we're full steam ahead for November 16th.
Okay, great. And then one last question for you guys. It was kind of discussed for the distance learning version of this question, but for the hybrid version, if I have a student in ag mechanics, might be a good example, ag bio or digital arts, and the teacher decides to stay home on distance learning, would our student who's in the hybrid model be able to attend that distance learning class, whether they go to an empty classroom on campus during fourth period to make that class, or can watch videos at home, especially on these specialty classes where we only have, you know, I think our whole district has 3 ag teachers. What are kind of our options for our hybrid kids if that teacher goes distance learning?
I don't know if Jared or Dave want to maybe take this one with your secondary hats on. I mean, part of that is certainly something we'll have to talk with our labor partners about, if those people are home, and how we're going to do that. Dave, it looks like you were trying to jump in.
Right. No, that's exactly right, Sean. Those are great questions, and those are the things that we will be at the table with our labor partners discussing. So we are aware of all those special circumstances. We want to try to accommodate as many of our students as we can. And that's definitely a good question and a scenario that we'll come upon. So we're going to try to get that worked out as soon as possible.
And I can also imagine that's pretty important information for families in deciding on your option. And so anything we can do to get that out to you, you know, just as soon as we possibly can, we will do that, because I know that weighs in families' decisions.
Hi.
Hello.
Wondering about as far as full normal, no restrictions, have we been given a particular goal based on reaching a particularly low positivity rate, or are there other factors?
Well, I'll just reference a little feedback there. Maybe better.
Oh, just a second. Let me mute myself while you talk. Hold on.
Thanks. I'll just reference something Dr. Kerr mentioned in her update to the Board of Trustees at last week's meeting. I haven't seen this in writing anywhere, but she just said returning 100% of our students with no restrictions would likely, be after there's a vaccine readily available, and a good portion of our population has had it. And I know that was hard for some people to hear, but those were the words from her mouth. And so, with her being our local health officer and making those decisions, that's kind of what we're operating under now. But as we know, the guidance changes all the time, and the more they learn about COVID-19, the more things change. So we will take our direction from California Department of Public Health as well as Dr. Kerr on anything like that.
Hi there. Thank you so much for letting me ask another question. I noticed there actually are a lot of elementary parents on this call, so I think this might help ease some fears about the 3 hours a day situation. Historically speaking, ELP hasn't really been a viable option because there's a wait list. It fills up very quickly. I was wondering what the plan was for ELP, if it was extended or multiple sites, because implementing the 3 hours, is it the intent of the district so for example, a PM student would get dropped off in the morning and they're in ELP that whole time and then go to school, or vice versa. You go to school for the AM shift and then are in ELP. I'm struggling seeing how the 6 foot piece, sorry, I'm brain farting, 6-piece social distancing aspect would be plausible at one site with that many students in ELP. Or is ELP still limited to our current numbering?
I don't know if Donna Custodio, our ELP director, is in this meeting or not. If she is, maybe she can jump in. But to answer the first question, yes, the idea would be that if your student's in the afternoon cohort and you have to go to work, you could bring them to ELP in the morning. They would be at ELP until they go to their afternoon cohort and have that, care until you got off work and were able to pick them up. As far as waiting list or expansion, I do not have the current information or details on that. And so I don't know if anyone else of our cabinet members has that information.
Well, I just know that space, because of you pointed out the 6 foot distancing, space in ELP will be limited. So we will try to accommodate as much as we possibly can in ELP, but we do anticipate that ELP will fill up.
Okay, so given that, when you send out I'm just going to call it a mailer to decide for distance learning or in person, maybe if there could be some information specific to ELP, and also as best as you possibly can with the information that you have available to you. I know that's a very broad statement. If a elementary student is to remain on distance learning because of, unfortunate for them, their family's work, statistically speaking, what are the odds of being able to keep their same teacher, or again, the option of the camera thing? If you could just share any information that you learn from your labor partners regarding the camera in the classroom, I think that would significantly help us parents be able to complete this form for you in a timely fashion.
Okay, no, that's great feedback. I appreciate that. We'll work with Donna to get more details when you're making your decision as well for ELP.
Yeah, those are both of you pointing that out is a great idea to, my decision is contingent on this or whatever. So thank you.
Mm-hmm. No problem. Thank you.
This has been great. Are there any other questions? We've really, I think, covered a lot of ground, and I think the questions
I
that.
have one.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, so I have a question about the restrooms at every campus. When we have students in class, it's very often that students need to be excused to go use the restroom. You've got high schoolers that have girls that need to use the restroom for menstrual cycle to deal with those. What is your protocol in the restroom use at each site? Is there going to be a bathroom monitor outside? Is it going to be only one bathroom on campus for a boy and a girl? Or is every restroom going to be open and it needs to be manned by someone to clean it after every student has used the restroom? There's been no talk about any of this topic.
I don't know, Jared may have a little more information, but I think we're going to try to keep all the restrooms open because, yeah, I mean, yes, you make some very good points. We are going to do, you know, the bathrooms will be sanitized or disinfected frequently throughout the day. You know, it will be a challenge to do it in between every single student, but, you know, we're going to do our best to sanitize it. You know, it'll be very frequently throughout the day. I don't know if Jared, you want to add any more to that, or?
Well, we're not, Dr. Kerr's direction has not been that we sanitize after every single use. That would be impossible to pull off. So it will be frequent sanitation of restrooms throughout the day.
Okay, and then is there going to be some kind of monitoring, like each class is only allowed to have one person out at one time, so that there's not accumulation of students going to the restroom?
Each school site is going to have their site-specific plan on these types of things, and our principals are already digging in. So I can't really speak to exactly what that will look like. Our principals are doing a great job of coming up with how this is all going to look. And so each site will have a plan on how to deal with that.
Okay, thank you for answering my questions.
You're welcome.
Yeah, you're welcome. Just as an example, we're learning a lot from other places who are doing hybrid models or are starting it. So typically we ask students to use the bathroom during their passing time. Well, you can imagine, you know, you get 20 kids in the bathroom at the same time. We don't want that. So it's almost reverse of that, where you encourage students to leave class and go during class to limit the number of students in there at the same time.
So Sean, I would just add one more comment about monitoring and supervision. That's something that we all take really seriously, and our site principals take that very seriously. We also have excellent campus supervisors at all of our secondary schools. We'll also be bringing back additional staff that previously had been laid off when we weren't sure about what the governor's budget was going to be in the state of California. So when we come back in hybrid, we'll have additional supervision, and our principals and assistant principals and extra staff know that it's all hands on deck, and the priority is to be out there making sure that we are closely watching and helping and supporting to make sure that this is a healthy and safe transition back to our campuses. So I'll just say I really appreciate all the questions and so many people who hopped onto this meeting. I think we had maybe close to 200, a little over 200.
I have a question before you guys go. Sorry, I think you guys are about to leave.
Go ahead.
I just have a question about the students that are currently in an elective class with one teacher that teaches that subject. If they elect to go distance learning, and that one teacher is going to be on campus with the hybrid group, if that other class is not offered through Edgenuity, how does that work for that student in the elective class mid-semester? Do they lose their credits? How do they make up that work? I know people are talking about videos in classrooms and stuff, but I mean, I know that's probably going to be really complicated with liability and all of that, considering we have students who won't even allow videotaping of Zoom. So what is going to happen to the students who do need to do distance but cannot do that class with their teacher anymore?
Yeah, those are the challenging down to that level of situation that are going to be difficult to deal with. I think it's safe to say the student will not lose their credits. you're kind of talking about some singleton type courses, and maybe Jared can talk a little more to this, but that's going to be a challenge that we are going to do everything we can to avoid. I don't know if we have an exact answer at this point.
Okay, one more on top of that then. What if there was a class where, let's say, out of the, I don't know, 16 students, let's say 15 want to do distance learning for that particular class? Are we saying that teacher is going back on campus hybrid for one student, or are we going to do majority rules and that student will go to distance learning and the teacher would essentially be trying to do both? Or will it be all or nothing, even if it's 2 kids in a class for hybrid? Those are my questions.
Yeah, that's another very, very
Okay.
good question.
These
that
are the ones we think of as teachers.
Yeah,
So I'm just putting it out there as these are the wheels are spinning now.
Yeah, and I don't want to dismiss your question in any way. I just think it's hard to answer prior to the data. That I just think it's going to be a problem that we have to tackle once we know those exact scenarios, and that's what we can do at our schools when it comes to credits and things like that. And we're going to do everything we can. I mean, there's no way we're going to shortchange kids on credits. We'll make sure to figure it out. But a lot of to specifically answer your question is hard, just because until we have the data, it's difficult to answer. So I hope you understand that.
Yeah, I know it goes both ways. We need the data for that. They need it for this. That's the difficult. It's like putting the which came first, the chicken or the egg. I get it. That's definitely a big concern.
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Right. No, thank you.
Okay, Demi, is there anyone else with a hand raised? Okay, again, just thank you so much for coming out and being a part of this very important town hall meeting. We have another one scheduled for Thursday.
Hello?
Oh, okay, I'm getting word from Demi that there are like 6 more hands.
Okay. Hello?
All right. So let's see what we can do to take those questions. She was
Yes,
on mute.
can you hear me?
Go ahead.
Hi, this is Dana. We have two children. One is in 3rd grade at Ione Elementary. We have another one who's in 8th grade at the junior high. Just have a couple of questions. A lot of my questions have already been asked and answered, so thank you for that. My first question is regarding support staff. Are they going to be hired back? And if so, when?
That's probably a question for Dave, maybe, or I don't.
So he's on mute right now, so I'll jump in. I was speaking to that a couple of minutes ago, and yes, we will be bringing back some of the staff that have not yet been brought back. Some will be coming back for the October 19th support, and then additional on the November 16th date. So we're in the process of that, yes.
Okay, and also the face masks. Are you guys accepting face shields instead of face masks, especially for those children who have asthma?
Yeah, they will need to wear what Dr. Kerr's requiring is a face shield with a drape. So that needs to have a cloth drape at the bottom. But yes, face shields will be allowed under that circumstance.
Okay. And I think that's it. Thank you.
And Dana, just it kind of gets me to think, because I think a lot of people are wondering about this. Families will be allowed to bring their own personal protective equipment as long as it meets the requirements. So if you found a face shield or a mask or something that you think your student will be more comfortable with, because we know a lot of this has to do with comfort. I mean, I have elementary age children of my own, and my kindergarten son has a shark mask, and he loves wearing the shark mask, but you give him a plain mask, he's not going to wear it. And so, you just need to check with your school. But if you have something that is better for you, that we don't provide that exact product and it works, more power to you.
Okay, thank you so much for that.
You're welcome.
Hello.
Hi, go ahead.
Hi, it's Melissa Johnson. Hi, I have 2 seniors at Argonaut, twins, Kate and Luke, and they were wondering if it's possible, if enough students choose to do distance learning and the class sizes are smaller, would you consider letting all the seniors go to school on one day instead of dividing up by alphabet?
Ooh.
That's a great question. Or do they not want to go to school on the same day? Maybe they want to go, just kidding. So I think that that would be very hard because so many of our classes at the high school level are mixed grade level. And so to do only one group, like seniors only, seniors in their electives, and even in some of their core classes like math and science, they're mixed with other grade levels. So I don't want to say definitively, but at this point in time, I would say probably not, that I don't think we could do that type of scenario.
I'm going to throw this out there while we have a moment of silence. So if you had a question that you weren't able to ask tonight, I received from Demi Wright, our communications specialist. If you email it to her, we will get back to you and answer it. And we may even add it to the new FAQ that we'll put on top of this.
Hi, everybody. This is Ramona. I'm here with Samantha, just so you know who you're talking to. A few of our questions have actually already kind of sort of been answered. My first question actually is about our progress through the color code system the governor has, and it looks like our color code system will have us open in the county fully before we open for a hybrid in the school. Is there consideration on that, or will it just go back to the board to decide in a few weeks?
So that's a great question, and it's easy to confuse the color code system for businesses with what we're doing here in school. So Dr. Kerr clarified that for us at one of the board meetings in the update she gave. Once you're out of the purple tier, like the only color that really applies to schools is purple. So if you're a county that's in the purple, you are not eligible to open for in-person instruction at all. It's distance learning only. Once you leave the purple and are in red for 14 days, you're eligible to open for in-person, meeting all those safety requirements with 6 feet and masks and everything. After that, the colors and the tiers do not matter at all for the educational system. They only apply to the businesses. So like, for example, today going to the orange, now restaurants can have, I think it's 50% of capacity, something like that. So they don't apply to us anymore, and it's very confusing. I honestly didn't understand it until a few weeks ago when it was pointed out. No, it's only really for businesses. So thank you for asking that, so we can clarify it for others.
Okay, it's still kind of strange that the schools aren't considered a business. It's a business of government, which is a sector of the community. So it is quite odd. Thank you. And then can you please provide the public with ingredients lists to be used in the fogging in the classrooms, and how you'll provide that service, how you still provide service to chemically sensitive students while using chemicals daily, or will those students automatically just should know and should choose distance learning? And then I guess how will that affect when things just go back to normal anyways? Will we be, I hate to say doused in chemicals, but it's a lot of chemicals going on. So
yeah, Mona, that's a great question. We have actually elected to not use the fogging devices. There's a lot of positives with the fogging devices, but some negatives, and that is one of them, just how airborne those chemicals are. And so we have chosen to stick with our approved disinfectant, which is approved for being around students and children of all ages, and it will be sprayed directly onto surfaces. We will not be fogging our classrooms. And so students who are sensitive to that, if they haven't had issues in the past, I don't think they will have issues now, because we're not doing anything novel or different than what we've really done in the past, except for we'll be disinfecting more often. But yeah, we will not be using the foggers.
Okay, that's actually really good news. And then I got from some of your comments before with the other questions that the district, because of the county advice, won't be honoring any waivers for children with allergies or asthma or sinus issues as far as face coverings. And because, let me just say, she goes to work every day and she wears a face shield, but she doesn't have to wear a drape covering all the oxygen coming in it. And, she doesn't have to go beyond that. So is there a way to get around that and only wear the face shield, or is everyone, it's not going to matter?
We are working on an alternative to the drape with a face shield that we need to consult with Dr. Curran. They are making these small shields that basically just kind of sit on the chin, and it does it, so it kind of comes from down and up, and then the face shield comes from up above and down. So we will be looking into seeing if the combination of those two would be allowable versus the drape. But yeah, we really have to align ourselves with Dr. Kerr on that. So we'll get more information to you on that. That's a great question.
Okay. Was there anything else, Sammy?
I don't think so.
Thank you very much for your time.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Good questions.
Hello, I have 2 questions, quick ones.
Yes.
First of all, at the secondary level, are we to assume that there will be no disinfecting in between classes because the passing period is so short?
What we're trying to work out, it's a great question, and it is much more complicated at the secondary level, is setting up the classrooms in a way where you would have, like for your 2 morning classes, you would have the students stagger themselves in the desks, where the next group that comes in right after them would sit in the opposite desks. In other words, the desks that weren't sat in the first period, and then disinfecting would go on during the lunch hour. And then in the afternoon, you would do the same thing to help mitigate. But yeah, we will not be able to fully disinfect every classroom during a 10-minute passing period. And
Right.
so that's just one strategy to help mitigate.
And the second one is, if my kids do the distance learning and then say we go back into the purple and everyone has to go back to distance learning, would my kids be integrated back to their normal classes, or would they stay in the Edgenuity based platform program?
Thank you for asking that, Ben. That's so once you're out of the purple and you launch your school year in person, which is what we will be doing November 16th, unless we go to purple before then. Once you launch it, you don't go back to distance learning full on if you go back to purple. You still proceed on those protocols I outlined earlier, where if there's a positive test, the cohort goes home. So a really good question, and I know these rules and the guidelines are very confusing, but that's it only applies to up until you launch your school year.
Okay, thank you.
Hi, I had 2 questions. One was answered. You initially talked about now versus January. I'm kind of wishing it was January. And I wonder if you could include in the survey maybe some sort of question where people could indicate if they might have a different answer after the holidays and after flu season's kind of taken hold a little bit.
So I'm opting for distance learning now, but if you
asked me in January, I might have a different answer.
Okay.
But my main question was actually, I totally understand that we need to make a commitment to you guys for the year so you can figure out the staffing. But as far as your commitment to us, if we go back to school hybrid, and once the rubber hits the road and the kids are in there, especially, well, actually at all levels, if it becomes apparent that the masks and the social distancing is not enforceable and the restrictions are lessened or even abandoned, can families change their mind at that point?
I think, obviously if it's something safety related where things like that are occurring, again, we want to work with families. We want to help you do what's best for each student. And, I'm just a comment on the whole 6-foot distancing and mask requirement. Students who are not following along with that will not be allowed to attend the in-person hybrid model. They'll be sent home for distance learning, full-time distance learning. It won't be a first offense type thing. It'll be progressive discipline, but students who are blatantly, running up and jumping on each other's shoulders or something like that, that's blatant disregard for the 6-foot distancing requirement, or, repeatedly being told to put their mask on and they're not. They unfortunately, just won't be able to attend in person because they can't comply with the safety requirements.
Thanks for making that clear, Sean.
You're welcome.
Hi, can you hear me? This is Scott.
Yes, go ahead.
Thanks. I had a question or a couple questions about in-classroom safety, and I'm wondering if the district has talked to Dr. Kerr about this or vice versa. Since the coronavirus is mainly spread through the air, filtering and circulating the indoor air with fresh air is important to reduce the airborne virus. And I was reading recently that the National Education Association has several recommendations regarding filtration and air circulation. One of them being that they think school districts need to increase ventilation with outdoor air to ensure a good air exchange rate. I'm not sure if the district is aware of the standards, but I was just curious if they are aware of the standards, if you know if each campus meets those standards, their HVAC and ventilation systems. And the second, and a comment related to that is the problem with doing that, with going back to the classroom in the fall and winter, is trying to ensure that ventilation mix while keeping the children and staff warm during the cold months. And then the second question is kind of related. If a student or staff member tests positive for COVID-19, they're on campus, does each campus have an isolation room that has a dedicated HVAC system to prevent that air from mixing with other spaces in the school?
Yes, Scott, I'll take both those questions. I'll take the second one first because it's quick. Yeah, each school site is working on having what's referred to as a care room. And the HVAC situation will be based on each one of those rooms. And we will be buying air scrubbers or air filters for rooms that may not meet those standards. We have a couple hundred new HVAC units that were put in through our Optera project a couple of years ago. So most of our classrooms do meet those requirements for the recirculation of air. And so they do bring in a fair amount of outside air, even when they are heating up a classroom. And again, when we run into situations with particular rooms that may not meet standards, we will look at potentially buying air scrubbers or an extra air filter that would, sit on the ground or sit up on a counter to help with the filtration of the air. Because yeah, you're absolutely right. The airborne aspect of it is huge. I hope that answered your question. It looks like you're remuted.
And I've been informed that we have 2 more questions or 2 more people.
And if you don't get a chance, again, we have another one of these Thursday at 5, and you can, Demi Wright put her email address in the chat bar for you to email it as well, so.
Hello, how are you?
Good, thank you.
Wonderful. I know these are uncertain times for all, and we're all kind of winging it to make it the best for our children and ourselves, correct? I got a couple questions for you. One is in regards to the teachers. Is that something that the school board has the say so in whether they are on campus or distance learning teachers?
Dave's muted. Okay, he's not able to get himself unmuted. I don't know.
I'll be happy to answer that question. In the meantime,
Okay,
Demi,
great.
you might see if you could unmute Dave. So to try to answer your question, it's something that gets negotiated at the table with our labor partners, and we are in the process of doing that, and am confident that we will be finished with that negotiation process before October 19th, when some of our students return to campuses, and then certainly before November 16th. So more information to follow on that.
So that's kind of disheartening. So basically it's not really up to the teacher, it's kind of up to the board itself.
No, it's not up to the board. It's a process of negotiating and making agreements with our labor partners. For the school district, that's the Amador County Teachers Association.
Well, okay. My next one is that I vaguely heard something about school being completely reopened upon a vaccine being discovered, correct?
Well, that I was just kind of quoting what Dr. Kerr mentioned in her update to the board last week. This hasn't officially come out from California Department of Public Health or CDC, but basically what she was saying is until that had happened and a good portion of our population had it, or we have herd immunity, I think she said as well, schools probably would not reopen without restrictions, with no masks, no 6-foot distancing. That just quoting what she had said.
Okay, yeah, that's kind of disheartening to me as well. Now, first say that they did come up with the vaccine and you refuse to have it administered via child or parent. Is your child no longer allowed to attend the school?
Yeah, that's the first question everyone asks, like, well, can we come to school if they don't have it? And that will be guidance that we will be given from, Centers for Disease Control or California Department of Public Health or California Department of Education may set guidelines on all of that. So we will not be making those decisions ourselves. We will follow the guidelines that were provided at that time.
Wow, so basically both of my questions were vaguely unanswered. So I guess we're just playing it by ear at this point.
We're awaiting further guidance on that. Absolutely.
All right.
Hi, this is Amy. I have a couple of questions for you guys. One is, have we thought about new students joining our school, moving to our district, or students who may have left our district this school year? Maybe they chose homeschool or another online platform. Are we going to be reaching out to them to see if they're coming back? Because I know I have my daughter in a different school this year, and when we decide to come back, I do want her to come back. So I just wanted to make sure that the district maybe was thinking about the amount of students we lost and if they're coming back and if they have a choice for hybrid or distance learning.
We were talking about this last week. Someone pointed out, well, if we just do our messaging via InTouch, then we may not reach some of those families like you, Amy. I know we reached you, obviously, but so the goal was to put it out via social media outlets and get the word out just as widely as possible. And certainly we would welcome students back who wanted to come back and rejoin us. So anything, we even talked about possibly, using the Ledger and, KVGC. I know we've had some interviews on there. So just really trying to get that word out there. I don't know that we have a way to individually reach out to those families, but really trying to help spread the word is what we want to do.
And then I have a couple more questions. So for my own situation, my daughter has an autoimmune disorder. And so I'm struggling between keeping her safe and keeping her in distance learning and looking out for her social emotional well-being and putting her back in school so she gets that. It's a big struggle right now. So I just don't like making the commitment for the whole year. Like, I want her to go back, but if it becomes where it's too hard on her health, do I get to pull her out and do distance learning again? Is there flexibility, or would I need to get a 504 for that?
Yeah, I said earlier in the meeting, we really want to try to work with people however we can to meet each student's individual needs. So certainly that's a circumstance that is pretty unique. And if there's any way possible for us to do it, we will help you make that decision. And certainly that is a unique circumstance, unlike maybe some of the other ones. So
okay, I appreciate it. Thank you. And then my last concern or question is that we only have one nurse for our school district. Is there talk about hiring another nurse, or do we feel that having one nurse is adequate for an entire school district?
So we have one nurse that is actually an employee of ours, but a few board meetings ago, I brought forward a contract to contract with an agency to provide nursing services to us. And so we've had a nurse that's been supporting Dawn, our current nurse, who just finished up her tenure with us. And we have a couple other ones who are in the works to start with us. So absolutely, by October 19th, really, when we start with those at-risk cohorts, we want to have fully staffed nursing services, and we've got a lot of candidates in the queue through those staffing agencies.
That is reassuring. Thank you.
Yes. I actually have another agency that is trying to give us some candidates that I'll be presenting a contract to the board next week, to give us more options and not just have one agency, but have another one to work with as well.
Okay.
All right, I have been told that that was our last speaker for this evening. And again, I want to remind everyone that we have another meeting just like this scheduled for Thursday this week at 5 o'clock. And we welcome you to come back if you would like to. And we thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. Have a great evening and please be well. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you.